alive and he's living on the inside, roaring like a lion, like God is not dead. He's surely alive and he's living on the inside, roaring like a lion, like God is not dead. He's surely alive and he's living.
We're going to drop down to verse 17, and it says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and he is found. So they began to celebrate. Identity can be very important. Maybe you've heard the humorous story about the minister who was having difficulty with his assigned parking spaces on the church parking lot. People like to park in his spot whenever they pleased. And you should think that he should be okay with that. But this guy wasn't. So he put up a sign that clearly said, this space is reserved. He thought the sign needed to be clear, so he made a different sign which read, reserved for the minister only. Still, people ignored it and parked in the space whenever they felt like it. Maybe the sign should be more forceful, he thought. So he devised a more intimidating one. A sign that was more intimidating, which announced, thou shalt not park here. The sign didn't make any difference. Finally, he hit upon the words that worked, and no one ever parked there again. The sign read, the one who parks here preaches a sermon on Sunday morning. Identity can be very important. I wish that one of you had parked in my parking space this morning, but identity theft, identity can be very important. And we have today a problem with identity theft. And right now it's pretty bad. China is hacking our country. Russia is computer hacking our country. Major companies from insurance to credit card companies and hospitals are being hacked, and people's personal identification are being taken from the internet and from what's supposed to be secure locations. Let me ask you this. Let me say this. Satan is hacking the definition of being a Christian today. Today, it was bad enough when they were trying to tear the church down and mock the church. But now Hollywood and the media are trying to redefine what it means to be a Christian and dragging it away from the scriptures of our Word of God. I ask you, has the devil stolen your identity? How do you define yourself? Do you define yourself by your job? I'm Roger Fogan, and I'm a minister. I'm Tim Belcher. I am the city engineer for the city of Plainfield. Take that. I'm Bob Hines. I am an owner of a fabrication company. Maybe you define yourself as a teacher. Maybe you define yourself as a lawyer. Maybe you have a variety of jobs that you can define yourself. And we often do that, because one of the things that we do when we meet somebody is we say to them, hey, my name's Roger Fogan. Oh, my name is John Doe. What a coincidence. There's a lot of people with that name. Well, what do you do for a living, John Doe? That's one of the first questions we ask, because in our society today, we often identify ourselves by our jobs. Maybe you define yourself by your family. My name is Roseanne Hines, and I am the mother of a multitude of generations. Or I'm Bill's wife, or I'm Cindy's husband, or something. Maybe we use family to define ourselves. I like the story historians tell about the funeral of Charlemagne. Charlemagne was one of the greatest Christian rulers in the Middle Ages. After his death, a mighty funeral procession left his castle for the cathedral at Aix. The casket arrived with a lot of pomp and circumstance. It was met by the local bishop, who barred the cathedral door. "Who comes?" the bishop asked, as was the custom. "Charlemagne, Lord and King of the Holy Roman Empire," proclaimed the emperor's proud herald. "Him I know not," the bishop replied. "Who comes?" The herald was a bit shaken up, and he said, "Charlemagne the Great, a good and honest man of earth." "Him I know not," the bishop said again. "Who comes?" The herald now was completely crushed. He responded, "Charles, a lowly sinner who begs the gift of Christ." To which the bishop, Christ's representative, responded, "Enter, receive Christ's gift of life." The point, of course, is that in God's eyes, we are all equally needy. Charlemagne, Billy Graham, you, me, none of us will ever be good enough to force entrance into the presence of God. Let me ask you this morning, is your faith a part of your identity? Too many people in the media are trying to redefine Christian as we compromise to get along with everybody else, and what it means to be a Christian. The significance of being a disciple of Christ becomes lessened and lessened. You have identity theft. You also have mistaken identity. The prodigal son left his home. "Dad, give me what's mine." I'm going to make my own way into this world. And I'm not looking back. So his father gave him half of everything that was going to him. And he proudly walked down the street. Maybe he even hired a carriage to take him in, or a chariot. But he went on his way. But the man that walked down that street toward his future is not the same man who came back down that same road to come home. Even though the prodigal son came home and was humbled, he lost everything. He lost everything. You know, there's a part of me. At one of the, y'all know, and I'm not going to mention this every sermon. Y'all know that a couple months ago I lost my mom. And part of having parents is being able to say, "Look, Mom, look, Dad, look what I can do." To have their encouragement, to have their boasting, to have their support, you know. "Look at me, Mom. I can stand on one foot." And this prodigal son, I believe that was in his mind and in his heart. And his first name wasn't Prodigal, by the way. And that was this. That my dad has been so successful. I'm really going to show him what successful is all about. Give me what's mine. You know it belongs to me. I'll show you what it means to be successful. And he goes and he squanders and he wastes. "Look at me, Dad. Look at all the friends that I have. I'm living a life. What do you think of me, Dad?" And he loses it all. And he starts slopping pigs. And let me tell you something. I like my bacon. You're probably saying, "I couldn't tell." But I like my bacon. I like my pork ribs. And let me tell you that being a pig farmer is an honorable position, an honorable job. And I thank all the pig farmers for making me the man I am today. But this guy wasn't a pig farmer. He was a pig servant. I mean, he wasn't even hardly an employee. The pigs were held in higher esteem than he was. The pig was more valuable to them. And he's sitting there wishing that he was at least good enough to eat pig slop. And he said, my dad's servants have it eat so much better than me. They have it so much better than me. I can do better if my father helps me. So he came home and he was humbled. And he came home, though, living with a mistaken identity. He left with a mistaken identity, thinking he was all that. But he came home thinking that he was not hardly even worthy of being a servant. Often the way back from sin carries low self-esteem. You have tried it your way, and you have failed. Any effort outside of God, brothers and sisters, I don't care if you're the CEO of a corporation, any effort outside of God will result in failure, ultimately.